Number 1. Beverley Allitt, the Angel of Death. Beverley Allitt was a nurse whose name would later become one of the darkest in Britain's medical history. Born on October 4, 1968, in Corby Glen, Lincolnshire, she grew up as a quiet and polite girl. People who knew her in childhood said she seemed caring, friendly, and eager to help. No one imagined that this same woman would one day be known as the Angel of Death. After finishing her nursing training, Beverley was assigned to the children's ward at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire. She was only 22 years old when she began working there. At first, she appeared dedicated and trustworthy. Parents liked her calm attitude, and she seemed genuinely caring toward the young patients. But within weeks of her arrival, the hospital's children's ward turned into a place of tragedy and confusion. Between February and April of 1991, a series of sudden and unexplained medical emergencies began happening on that ward. Babies and young children who were recovering from simple illnesses suddenly went into cardiac arrest, stopped breathing, or collapsed without warning. Doctors were baffled. There was no clear medical reason why so many healthy children were dying. Then, staff began to notice a strange pattern. Every time one of these incidents occurred, Nurse Beverley Allitt was on duty. In just 59 days, 13 children were attacked. 4 of them died, and 9 others barely survived. Allitt's first victim was 7-week-old Liam Taylor, who had been admitted with a mild chest infection. While appearing affectionate and caring toward him, she secretly injected him with insulin and potassium, causing his condition to crash. Although doctors managed to revive him the first time, Beverley struck again the following day, and Liam died. The grieving parents had no idea that the very nurse who had been comforting them was the reason their baby was gone. Her second victim was 11-year-old Timothy Hardwick, a boy with cerebral palsy. He was admitted after a minor seizure, but seemed fine. Just hours later, he was found lifeless. Allitt claimed she discovered him unresponsive and tried to help, but in truth, she had smothered him. A few days later, she targeted 2-month-old twins, Becky and Katie Phillips. Becky suddenly collapsed and died after a night in Allitt's care. Her twin sister Katie was later admitted for monitoring. During that stay, Beverley tampered with her oxygen levels, causing severe brain damage that left her permanently disabled. Despite these alarming incidents, the hospital initially failed to connect the dots. When 5-year-old Bradley Gibson suffered a sudden insulin overdose, some staff began to question what was going on, but it was still unthinkable that a nurse could be responsible. More children continued to collapse without explanation, including Michael Davidson, who barely survived, and others whose lives were changed forever by oxygen deprivation or heart failure. As the number of suspicious deaths grew, doctors finally raised serious concerns. They began to suspect that someone in the ward was harming the children. A senior pediatrician reviewed patient charts and noticed that nearly all of the incidents happened during Allitt's shifts. The police were called in, and soon the hospital was at the center of a massive investigation. Toxicology tests revealed extremely high levels of insulin and potassium in several of the young victims, levels that could only have been injected intentionally. When investigators searched Allitt's locker and work records, they found inconsistencies and missing medication that should have been accounted for. She had also been signing out drugs that she had no reason to use. Detectives began to suspect that Allitt suffered from a mental disorder known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a condition where someone deliberately harms others to draw attention and sympathy for themselves. In Allitt's case, she seemed to enjoy the praise she got for being calm and heroic during emergencies that she had secretly caused. In November 1991, police arrested Beverley Allitt. She denied every accusation, showing no emotion or concern for the dead and injured children. Her calmness during questioning disturbed the investigators. They described her as cold, manipulative, and strangely proud of her position as a nurse. Her trial began in 1993 at Nottingham Crown Court and lasted nearly 2 months. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence linking her to the deaths and near deaths of 13 children. Medical experts testified that the insulin and potassium injections were deliberate and that no natural cause could explain the sudden collapses. Nurses and doctors who worked with her gave emotional statements about how they had trusted her completely, never imagining she could do such evil things. The defense argued that Allitt was mentally ill and not fully responsible for her actions. Psychiatrists confirmed she had severe psychological problems and recommended hospital treatment instead of a standard prison sentence. The judge accepted the medical opinion, and Beverley Allitt was found guilty on 4 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and 6 counts of attempted murder counts of causing grievous bodily harm. She was sentenced to life imprisonment and ordered to be detained indefinitely at a secure psychiatric facility called Rampton Hospital. Even decades later, the memory of what she did still haunts Britain. Beverley Allitt became known as one of the country's most notorious serial killers, a nurse who used her position of trust to harm the innocent. Many of her victims who survived live with lifelong disabilities. Her actions forever changed hospital safety standards in the UK, leading to tighter monitoring and stricter drug control in children's wards. Today, Beverley Allitt remains confined in Rampton Hospital, where she has spent more than 30 years. The once smiling nurse who parents trusted is now remembered as the Angel of Death, a chilling reminder that evil can hide behind the face of kindness, even in a place meant for healing. Number 2. Genene Jones. Genene Jones was a pediatric nurse from Texas who became known as one of America's most infamous medical killers. She was born on July 13, 1950, in San Antonio, Texas. To most people, she seemed like a kind woman who loved children and wanted to help sick babies get better. But behind her nurse's smile was a dark obsession with controlling life and death. Over time, she killed infants and children in her care by secretly injecting them with drugs that made them stop breathing or go into cardiac arrest. After finishing nursing school, Jones began working at Beverley County Hospital, now known as the University Hospital in San Antonio. Later, she moved to a small-town clinic in Kerrville. She worked in the pediatric units, where she had access to medicine, syringes, and babies who depended completely on her care. At first, no one suspected her of anything unusual. Doctors and families saw her as a nurse who cared deeply for her patients and often volunteered to work long hours. Then strange things started happening. Babies who had been stable suddenly stopped breathing. Infants who were recovering from minor illnesses suffered unexpected cardiac arrests. Many of these collapses happened when Genene was the one caring for them. And just like other medical angels of death, she often appeared calm and heroic during emergencies, rushing to save the same babies she had secretly harmed. In 1981, while working at Beverley County Hospital, the number of infant deaths in her ward rose sharply. Medical staff were alarmed but couldn't find an explanation. Some doctors suspected equipment problems or infections, but those theories never fully made sense. Around that time, several nurses whispered their fears that something was wrong with Genene Jones. She always seemed to be there when babies crashed. Still, without hard proof, the hospital did nothing official. To avoid scandal, the hospital quietly asked her to resign in 1982. After leaving the hospital, Jones got a new job at a small pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas, working under a local doctor named Dr. Kathleen Holland. It didn't take long for the same pattern to start again. Within months, healthy babies began collapsing with mysterious symptoms: seizures, breathing failure, and cardiac arrests. On September 17, 1982, a 15-month-old girl named Chelsea McClellan was brought in for routine vaccinations. She was perfectly healthy, but after Genene gave her an injection, Chelsea suddenly stopped breathing and went into cardiac arrest. Doctors tried to save her, but she died shortly after. Dr. Holland was heartbroken. She noticed that several of her young patients had died or nearly died while in Genene's care. This was no coincidence. She alerted authorities, and the clinic began an internal review. When investigators tested the clinic's vials of medicine, they found that some had been tampered with. They contained succinylcholine, a powerful drug that causes paralysis and stops breathing. It was a drug only used in controlled hospital settings, and it was never supposed to be in a children's clinic. Police soon realized that the same type of unexplained collapses had also occurred at Beverley County Hospital, where Genene had previously worked. In fact, experts later estimated that she may have been responsible for dozens of infant deaths there, possibly even over 60. The motive seemed chilling. She wanted to create medical emergencies so she could be seen as a hero trying to save the children's lives. In other words, she wanted attention, praise, and control, even if it meant killing innocent babies to get it. In 1983, Genene Jones was arrested and charged with murder and injury to a child. Her trial for the death of baby Chelsea McClellan began the following year in Kerrville, Texas. The prosecution presented powerful evidence that the child had been injected with a lethal dose of succinylcholine, and that Jones was the only person who could have administered it. Witnesses described how she always took charge during emergencies and how the number of deaths rose dramatically whenever she worked. Jones denied everything, claiming she loved children and would never harm them. But the jury didn't believe her. In 1984, she was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison. Later, She was convicted in a separate case of injury to a child, adding another 60-year sentence. For years, authorities suspected her of killing many more children at Bezar County Hospital, but because medical records from that time were incomplete and evidence had been lost, they couldn't prove it in court. Still, doctors who had worked with her believed she was responsible for many unexplained infant deaths during her time there. Some even called her the most dangerous nurse in America. In 2017, Texas prosecutors reopened several of those old cases after new evidence surfaced. Fearing she could be released early due to a change in parole laws, the state reinvestigated her earlier patients. Jones was charged with the murders of several more infants from the early 1980s, including 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer and 2-year-old Chelsea McClellan. In 2020, after years of denying her crimes, Genene Jones finally pleaded guilty to several additional murders. In court, she admitted to killing the babies and said she was sorry. For the families of her victims, those words were too little, too late. She was sentenced to life in prison and will never be eligible for parole. Today, Genene Jones remains behind bars in Texas. She is in her 70s now, serving her time quietly. She is believed to have killed between 60 and 70 infants during her career, though the true number may never be known. Her case stands as one of the most horrifying examples of betrayal in medicine, showing how a nurse trusted to heal children instead became the cause of their deaths. Her story, like that of other angels of death, changed the way hospitals monitor sudden deaths and medication handling. Genene Jones's name is now forever linked to cruelty, deception, and the terrifying abuse of medical trust. Number 3. Elizabeth Wettlaufer. Elizabeth Wettlaufer was a nurse from Canada whose shocking crimes changed the country's entire healthcare system. She was born on June 10, 1967, in Woodstock, Ontario. To most people, she appeared to be a caring and responsible nurse who had dedicated her life to helping the elderly. But behind that calm appearance was a woman who quietly turned into a serial killer, a nurse who chose her elderly patients as her victims and used insulin as her weapon. Elizabeth grew up in a strict Baptist family. Her parents were religious and expected her to live a moral life. But from a young age, she struggled with mental health problems, addiction, and feelings of anger and resentment. After finishing nursing school, she began working in several care homes for elderly people across Ontario. For years, she was trusted by families who believed their loved ones were safe in her care. In 2007, she got a job at Carissant Care Nursing Home in Woodstock. That's where the murders began. Her victims were mostly older patients, vulnerable men and women who depended on her for daily medical care. She started giving them massive doses of insulin, a hormone used to treat diabetes. In high amounts, insulin can cause a person's blood sugar to drop dangerously low, leading to seizures, brain damage, or death. Elizabeth later confessed that she didn't always plan the killings. Sometimes she said she would feel a sudden urge, a voice inside her telling her to inject the patients. She described it as a dark impulse she couldn't control. Her first known victim was James Silcox, an 84-year-old veteran and father of 6. He was recovering from surgery and expected to return home soon. But after Elizabeth gave him a large dose of insulin, he suddenly fell unconscious and died. After that first killing, she said she felt both powerful and guilty, but the feeling of control she got from ending a life made her do it again. Between 2007 and 2014, she continued to work as a nurse, moving between nursing homes and care facilities across Ontario. Each time, more patients mysteriously died. Families were told their loved ones had passed away from natural causes. No one suspected a nurse could be responsible. Her victims included men and women aged between 75 and 96. Some were diabetic and already receiving small doses of insulin, making it easy for her to hide her actions. Others weren't diabetic at all, which made the insulin even deadlier. When she wasn't killing, she was struggling with alcohol addiction, depression, and job discipline problems. She was fired several times for poor performance, but always managed to find another nursing job. In 2014, Elizabeth left Carissant Care and worked at a few other places, including the Meadow Park Nursing Home in London, Ontario, and a private home care agency. She continued to harm patients by injecting them with insulin. Some survived, but suffered severe complications like brain damage or paralysis. Her crimes might have continued for many more years if she hadn't reached a breaking point. By 2016, Elizabeth was overwhelmed by guilt and depression. She confessed her crimes to a therapist, telling them she had killed multiple patients with insulin injections. The therapist urged her to contact the police, and soon after, she turned herself in. She walked into a Toronto police station and calmly said, "I have done bad things. I gave people too much insulin." Investigators were shocked. They didn't even have any open murder cases related to her name. When she began listing her victims, they realized they were dealing with a serial killer who had gone completely undetected for nearly a decade. Elizabeth detailed each murder, explaining when, where, and how she killed. In total, she confessed to killing 8 elderly patients and attempting to kill 6 others between 2007 and 2016. Her confession led to a massive investigation that involved multiple nursing homes, police departments, and health authorities. Families of the victims were devastated. They had trusted her to care for their loved ones, not take their lives. Many of them described her as kind, patient, and gentle. No one could believe the woman they hugged and thanked for caring for their parents or grandparents had secretly been poisoning them. In 2017, Elizabeth Wettlaufer pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, and 2 counts of aggravated assault. During her sentencing, she openly admitted that she knew what she was doing was wrong, but felt an uncontrollable desire to kill. She said she sometimes believed she was acting on God's will, though later admitted that was just an excuse she told herself. The judge sentenced her to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 25 years. Elizabeth showed little emotion as she was led away in handcuffs. Her case horrified Canada and forced the government to launch a full public inquiry into how her crimes went unnoticed for so long. The inquiry revealed serious weaknesses in the healthcare system: poor oversight, lack of communication between nursing homes, and failure to investigate unusual patient deaths. As of today, Elizabeth Wettlaufer remains in prison in Ontario. She is in her late 50s and will likely die behind bars. The victims' families continue to fight for better protection and stronger checks on medical staff. Her actions destroyed trust in the nursing profession and left deep scars on the families she deceived. Elizabeth's story is one of betrayal and evil disguised as compassion. She was supposed to bring comfort and care to the elderly, but instead used her medical knowledge to kill them silently. Her case remains a haunting reminder that even those sworn to heal can become the very source of pain and death. Number 4. Kristen Gilbert. Kristen Gilbert was a nurse who turned one of America's most trusted professions into a tool for murder. She was born on November 13, 1967, in Fall River, Massachusetts. To her family and friends, she seemed like a bright and hard-working young woman. She studied nursing at Greenfield Community College and later became a registered nurse. In 1989, she began working at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northampton, Massachusetts, a hospital that cared for U.S. military veterans who had served their country. At first, Kristen appeared to be the perfect nurse, dedicated, competent, and always calm during emergencies. But beneath that image was someone who enjoyed creating chaos and controlling life and death. Her coworkers later said that strange things started happening after she joined the hospital. Veterans who had been stable suddenly went into cardiac arrest. Medical staff rushed to save them, and Kristen always seemed to be the first person on the scene, calling codes and performing CPR. At first, everyone thought she was just quick and dedicated. But as the months passed, the number of sudden deaths kept rising, and almost all of them occurred during Kristen's shifts. Between 1995 and 1996, a growing number of doctors and nurses at the hospital became suspicious. They noticed that whenever Kristen was working, there were more emergency code blue incidents, situations where a patient's heart or breathing stopped. When she was off duty, things were quiet. It didn't take long before people began whispering that she might be causing the emergencies herself. Some even gave her the nickname, the Angel of Death. Investigators later learned that Kristen's method of killing was simple but deadly. She would inject her patients with epinephrine, also known as adrenaline. In small doses, this drug is used to treat heart attacks and allergic reactions. But in large doses, it can cause the very thing it's supposed to prevent: a fatal cardiac arrest. After causing the crisis, she would often rush in to help and appear like a hero trying to save the patient's life. Her motive seemed to come from a twisted desire for attention. Kristen liked being seen as the skilled, calm nurse who could handle any crisis. Some investigators also believed she wanted to attract the attention of a hospital security guard she was romantically involved with. The emergencies gave her a chance to call him for help and appear brave and important. In 1996, hospital staff finally reported their suspicions to the Veterans Affairs Police. An internal investigation began, and the number of deaths during her shifts was reviewed. The results were alarming. The mortality rate was 3 times higher when Kristen was on duty. Soon after the investigation started, she resigned from her job and checked herself into a psychiatric hospital, claiming she was under too much stress. Police obtained a warrant to search her home, where they found stolen medical supplies, syringes, and vials of epinephrine. When they tested the bodies of several patients, toxicology results confirmed that they had died from adrenaline overdoses. The evidence pointed directly to Kristen. In 1998, she was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder and several counts of attempted murder. Her trial began in 2000 in a federal court in Springfield, Massachusetts. The prosecution described her as a cold and manipulative woman who enjoyed watching her patients suffer. They said she treated the hospital like her personal experiment ground, creating life-or-death situations just to gain admiration. The defense claimed she was innocent and that the patients had died of natural causes, as most were elderly veterans with health issues. But the jury wasn't convinced. Prosecutors presented detailed evidence showing a clear pattern. Kristen was always present when the deaths happened, and the same lethal drug was used every time. Fellow nurses also testified that she had joked about killing patients and even bragged that she could make someone stop breathing anytime she wanted. On March 14, 2001, the jury found Kristen Gilbert guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and 2 counts of assault. Because her crimes took place at a federal facility, the prosecution sought the death penalty. However, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision on execution, so the judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, Kristen showed little emotion. She never apologized to the families of the men she killed. Some of the victims' relatives described her as evil wearing a nurse's uniform. One of the prosecutors later said that Kristen killed for power, control, and attention, the most dangerous combination in a medical professional. Her conviction led to major changes in hospital monitoring and medication tracking within the Veterans Affairs system. Hospitals across the United States began implementing stricter drug control systems and closer reviews of sudden deaths under medical care. Today, Kristen Gilbert remains in a federal prison in Texas. She is in her late 50s and has spent more than 2 decades behind bars. She continues to deny being a murderer, though the evidence against her was overwhelming. Kristen's case stands as one of the most disturbing examples of how a person trusted to save lives used that very trust to destroy them. She was a nurse who wanted recognition so badly that she created tragedy after tragedy just to feel important. For the families of the veterans she killed, the pain never went away. The men who once survived wars died helplessly in a hospital, not because of illness or age, but because a nurse they trusted decided their time was up. Number 5. Kimberly Saenz. Kimberly Saenz was a nurse who turned a place meant for healing into a place of death. She was born in 1973 in Texas, USA, and grew up in a small town called Lufkin. She became a licensed vocational nurse in her 20s and found work at the DaVita Dialysis Center, a clinic where patients with kidney failure came several times a week to have their blood cleaned. These patients were often very sick and completely dependent on the nurses who took care of them. Kimberly's job was to help them survive, but instead, she used her position to harm and kill the very people she was meant to protect. In early 2008, staff and patients at the DaVita clinic began to notice strange things happening during Kimberly's shifts. Patients who were normally stable suddenly became violently ill during their dialysis treatments. They started vomiting, shaking, or complaining of a burning feeling in their veins. Some of them collapsed without warning, and a few even died right there in the clinic. Doctors and nurses were shocked and confused. Dialysis treatment was supposed to help patients feel better, not worse. Within a short period, 5 patients died under mysterious circumstances. Several others nearly lost their lives, but managed to survive. It was an alarming pattern, and all the incidents seemed to have one thing in common. They happened when Kimberly Saenz was on duty. The hospital management began to suspect that something was wrong. They called in the Lufkin Police Department and the Texas Department of Health to investigate. Investigators interviewed patients and staff members and reviewed the clinic's safety procedures. Many patients said they had seen Kimberly doing something strange. They claimed she was drawing bleach into syringes and then injecting it into the dialysis tubes connected to the patient's bloodlines. At first, it seemed unbelievable. Why would a nurse inject bleach, a household cleaning chemical, into someone's bloodstream? But when the investigators tested the dialysis equipment, they found traces of bleach exactly where the patient's blood had flowed through. The evidence was clear. Someone had deliberately poisoned them. Kimberly denied everything. She said she had only used bleach to clean the dialysis machines as part of the clinic's normal maintenance routine. It was true that bleach was used at the clinic for disinfection, but it was supposed to be thoroughly rinsed out before any treatment began. The way she handled it, however, was not part of any approved medical process. When police looked deeper into her past, they found a troubling history. Kimberly had been fired from several previous nursing jobs for unprofessional behavior, poor performance, and even drug use. Despite those red flags, she kept getting rehired in other medical facilities. Coworkers described her as moody, short-tempered, and sometimes reckless with safety procedures. Detectives placed hidden cameras in the DeVita clinic to monitor what was happening. What they captured confirmed their worst fears. Footage showed Kimberly handling syringes filled with bleach and tampering with the dialysis lines connected to patients. They also discovered that she kept personal notes in which she wrote about her work and how much she disliked certain patients. In April 2008, Kimberly Saenz was fired from the clinic and arrested shortly afterward. The investigation found that between April 1st and April 28, 2008, she had caused a series of medical emergencies that killed at least 5 patients and injured several others. The victims included Mickey Tardy, Garland Kelly, Cletus Davis, Opal Few, and Clara Strange, all elderly people who had trusted her completely. Her trial began in 2012 in Angelina County, Texas. The courtroom was packed with families of the victims, many of whom had known Kimberly personally. The prosecution presented the surveillance footage, the bleach test results, and the testimony of survivors who described the horror of what they felt as the bleach entered their bloodstream. A searing pain followed by sudden weakness and collapse. One patient testified that she saw Kimberly inject something clear into her dialysis line, and then smiled at her moments before she started to feel sick. Another staff member recalled that Kimberly seemed unusually calm every time a patient went into distress, as if she had been expecting it. The defense tried to argue that the bleach may have been left in the machines accidentally due to cleaning errors, and that Kimberly was being blamed unfairly for a system failure. But the pattern of deaths and the video evidence made it impossible to ignore her deliberate actions. After a long and emotional trial, the jury found Kimberly Saenz guilty of capital murder for killing 5 patients and guilty of aggravated assault for injuring several others. In April 2012, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The families of her victims wept as the verdict was read. Some said they would never understand why she did it. There was no clear motive. She didn't gain money, and she didn't seem to have a personal grudge. The only explanation she ever gave was that she was under stress and made mistakes, but the court didn't believe her. Her case became one of the most horrifying examples of medical betrayal in U.S. history. It exposed weaknesses in how clinics checked nurses' backgrounds and monitored patient safety. Many states later reviewed their hiring systems to prevent someone with Kimberly's record from ever being rehired in a medical job again. Today, Kimberly Saenz is in prison in Texas, serving multiple life sentences. She will never walk free again. Her crimes shocked both the medical community and the public because they showed how a nurse, someone trusted to heal, could instead become a silent killer. The victims' families continue to speak out to remind the world that what happened in that small dialysis clinic should never be allowed to happen again. Kimberly's name now stands alongside other infamous angels of death. But unlike real angels, she brought only suffering, fear, and loss to people who were already fighting to stay alive.
When I looked into your story, what I found extraordinary was it starts so happily. You're at school, you're dating the most handsome guy in the school, you're the envy of all the other girls. You end up having a baby with this guy, you marry him. It's like you've got a dream life. And yet, even remembering that is making you emotional.
Yes.
Because you've ended up here, now, in a position where, you're one of America's most notorious female serial killers. That's what you've been convicted of. Can you explain how that happened?
Well, I did have a good life, and subsequent another marriage and another child, and I was very happy. And I found myself working at a dialysis clinic that was more about money than they were about the lives of their patients. And there was a lot of things that happened, and I was falsely accused of something, and that's why I'm here today. But I know that I didn't do anything that would have done anything to harm another patient, another person, another human being. It's not in my nature.